Fresh from the classic comics come heroes in a half-shell. Carnivorous robots chow down in Chinatown, while brutal ninjutsu warriors, blood descendants of the Deadly Foot Clan, bust up bystanders from the Bronx to Broadway. Police SWAT teams can't stop them, but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles can, 'cause, powered by slices of pizza, they're always ready to rumble, with nunchakus, katana blades, and a party bus loaded with anti-Foot Clan missiles. So team up with the Turtles, Raphael, Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Donatello, then switch on the tortoise radar, following your map and sixth sense past savage traps and secret sewage passages, until you knock heads with the nasty ninjutsus and either splatter them senses or get yourself turned into turtle soup. Let's check it out. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a game developed by Ultra, spelled with a K, back in the 80s for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This is actually the very first video game I recall ever playing. I still remember that Christmas morning where I got it. I remember opening up the NES, and it came with the Mario Duck Hunt Combo Pack, a game that, to my understanding, most of us played back in the day and was our introduction to Super Mario Brothers. Now, looking back, it's kind of silly to just brush off Mario like it's nothing, but back then I didn't know who that fat plumber was. He was a nobody back then. But this was the Ninja Turtles. And I knew as soon as the Nintendo was hooked up, this was the game I wanted to play. And it kicked my ass. Little did I know how difficult it would be. Now, I'm not here to prattle on about whether the game is good or bad, because frankly we all have our own opinions, and sometimes we just maybe had bad memories or good memories of a game that influences our thoughts on them. Rather, I'm here to just discuss the game. This video is not scripted to any capacity. I did come up with some ideas of things I want to talk about, but mostly I just finished a Let's Play of the game, and I thought it would be an interesting idea to wrap up a series of playing the game by discussing it. So I'm going to be experimenting with that a little bit. Let me know what you think of the idea, and if I should continue doing it or just scrap the whole thing, or maybe change it up in some way. I had all these ideas for things to say, but now that the camera is rolling, I just can't formulate my thoughts. This is going well. Fantastic! Playing this game, you play as the titular Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as mentioned on the back of the box, and your objective varies from stage to stage, and that's actually one of the things I really like about the game, is how it approaches the progression of the story through the stages. It's not just a lot of games when you're going through it, it's just basically one objective. You go from stage to stage, but all the stages really do is serve as a means of getting from point A to point B. In this game, however, every area in the game has its own little storyline. It's kind of like, rather than just going on one adventure, you're playing a series of episodes from the television show or an issue from the comics, each with its own individual storyline that connects together as you go to create a whole. Starting off with rescuing April O'Neil at the beginning, then you learn from her you have to save the dam from being destroyed by bombs, and so on until your final confrontation with Shredder at the end. Throughout this story, you're freely able to use the turtles at your leisure. You have all four of them available, and you can swap between them whether you need to utilize their various strengths, items you've collected with them, or if one just gets low on health and you need to keep them alive. And that's another thing that is interesting about this game. A lot of games I've noticed, if you're a special team going in to save the day or perform some sort of operation, you usually really only choose one guy, and it never really makes you feel like much of a team. In this game, however, they fix that by giving you the freedom of selecting the characters as you go and as you need them. However, this is also one of the most disappointing aspects of the game. You see, the game's balancing kinda sucks. Yeah, sure, you can use all 4 of the turtles and they have their own special skills. Leo's got his sword, Michelangelo's got his nunchakus, you know the drill. But they didn't balance the characters very well, and so like some of the characters just aren't very good. Particularly Raphael and Michelangelo. Yeah, they swing a little bit faster, but their reach is kind of crummy, and they kind of have to put themselves in danger more than the others to really do anything. Leonardo's a bit more average. He gets the job done. He has enough range where, unless you're rushing, you can usually hit an enemy from a safe distance, and if you don't kill him, you don't have to worry about it. But then there's Donatello. Donatello is just the win button in the game. If you don't have him, you lose, unless you're just a pro at the game. And if you're not using him actively, you're probably going to switch that up real quick. He has the longest range, he hits the hardest. Yes, his attacks are kind of slow and awkward, which made me not really like him very much as a kid. But once you get used to him, there's really no other reason to use the other characters except to preserve Donatello's health. Like if he gets low, you want to use somebody else to protect him, or if you're making a precarious jump that might get you killed from a death trap, you'll want to risk one of the other turtles instead. Another problem with the game's balancing comes in another one of the more interesting elements of the game that ends up being kinda disappointing, and that's the special weapons. There's 4 special weapons you can acquire through the game. Shurikens, triple shurikens, boomerangs, and scrolls. But the shurikens and triple shurikens really aren't anything special. The triple shurikens aren't bad, and it's nice that you can find them from enemy drops, but I don't like how they make the standard shurikens completely obsolete. I would much rather they ditch one of those and have a more unique weapon. Maybe something that shoots at an angle or vertically upward to get enemies that are in awkward positions, rather than just having, here's this weapon, here's this better version of that weapon. There's only 4 special weapons in the game, and especially considering the fact that the scroll is just undeniably the best one, kinda leaves me wishing that there's a little bit more to it. Speaking of the special items, one of the most frustrating things about the game is how enemies just drop them so abruptly. I understand the idea of them dropping items so you can get them, but it's just, it can be so frustrating when you're just trying to rush through an area, striking down enemies that die in one hit, and then they just drop a shuriken, and it replaces your scrolls, or anything else. And I just wish that there was some way to not have to worry about that. I'm not really sure what that something would be, and I imagine it being especially complicated to try and come up with something like that back then, but it would be nice if there was a way to prevent that. Going back to the progression of the game, one of the things I think they did fantastically was the difficulty progression. I find a lot of games sometimes lose sight of that and have difficulty that, while progressively more difficult, can sometimes be a little sporadic. But Ninja Turtles, I think, nailed it. Very rarely do I feel like things get easier as you go on, save for maybe 1 or 2 of the late game bosses that are complete jokes. But as far as the stages themselves, they continually introduce new enemies. They oftentimes introduce new enemies in forgiving environments so you can get accustomed to them before having to face them in more challenging situations. And it just does a really good job of guiding you through the experience. Granted, there are some difficulty spikes here and there, but it never feels just so overwhelming that it feels insurmountable. Well, save for the blue soldiers in the final stage. Those guys just, well, they're the worst. They take a ton of damage, they fly around, You gotta get in weird positions to hit them without getting shot. And they just... Speaking of bosses... Shredder. Really, Kotrami? Really? Come on, he's supposed to be the final boss. I know he has an instant death laser, but the fact that he's so exploitable. He's supposed to be the big bad, the master of martial arts, the superb ninja, the greatest foe of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And yet, you can beat him so easily. I don't know if some of these exploits are deliberate, like they expect you to find these things out in order to beat him, or if they are unintentional, but it's just really disappointing, especially with how difficult the rest of the game is, only to just beat Shredder like he's some punk on the streets who can't properly fight and know how to defend himself. Really just the most anticlimactic way the game can end. Although I have to admit I have struggled against him in the past, and the first time I got to that point I did lose, although I believe the first time I fought him I did almost win, just jumping around, dodging his gun with Donatello, while stabbing him from a distance. But I think he eventually just got me with a punch, and as far as I recall, took out like half my health. I could be remembering that wrong, but I remember his basic punch attack dealing massive damage. So even if he doesn't hit you with his laser, he's probably going to kill you in 1 or 2 hits anyway, just with a claw to the face. The variety of gameplay in this game is fantastic. So many varying enemy types, each with their own tactics and strategies for handling them. The stages all feel different, and the overworld really adds a lot of interesting exploration aspects to the game. Most platformers at the time are just go from stage to stage in a super linear fashion, and while I think linear games are fantastic, I really like that sense of exploration. In addition to that, a lot of the areas can have randomized enemy layouts. Well, not entirely randomized, there's like 2, maybe 3 different setups, but it makes things interesting, especially if you have to revisit a place over and over again. Or if you're very familiar with the game and you want to keep going in and out of the door until you've got the enemy layout that you most favor. However, I wish they did a little bit more with the overworld. Maybe some secret areas, maybe some special items to find, perhaps upgrades of some sort. Because while it is a really cool mechanic, it feels kind of tedious once you already know exactly where to go. Yeah, I guess that could be said about any overworld, but it becomes less of an exploration to find where you need to go, and more of a cumbersome stage select screen. And I think that pretty much covers it. I know this isn't a very long video, but I mean, come on, it's an NES game and an old one at that. When did this come out? 88, 89, so... Okay, I guess it's not exceptionally old, but it is a platformer. Those games typically weren't very long. It is probably arguably larger than most because of the adventure aspect, although the side-scrolling stages aren't nearly as long as most games. A lot of them can be cleared within a minute or 2. So it's just not really a very big game, all things considered. It feels like it could have been bigger, or it wants you to think that it's larger than it really is. But yeah, just, again, this is kind of an experimental video. I'll be doing this probably with my next few Let's Plays, although whether or not I continue doing it in the long run will depend on how things go. Hopefully things will improve by then. And yeah, there you have it. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to join me for the next adventure I go on, when we dive into a new video game realm. Why did I end it like that? team them up with the blah blah blah. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a game developed for the police SWAT teams camp blah blah blah. Until you blah. Why is it so hard to read? Really, Co-Ultra? Really, Co-Ultra? It's kind of like rather than just blah 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 blah. Really, Co-Ultra? And I wanted to play as the Ninja Turtles and I'm keeping that in.